We're not looking for loyal anymore, Eric. We're looking for fresh blood. That's what the VP of Strategy, Carson Hale, told me, right in front of my team, and with a straight face like it was just another Tuesday. My name is Eric Madsen, 45 years old. And until last month, I was a director of systems integration at Crossbridge Industrial Solutions, a mid-sized logistics company based in Louisville, Kentucky. I was with the company for 13 years. 13 years. I built our internal system from scratch. Pre-cloud, pre-automation. I was there before we had CRM, before we had warehouse sensors, before anyone thought data pipeline was anything but a plumbing term. But none of that mattered. Not anymore. That Tuesday morning started like any other. Coffee at 6:30, inbox at 7, code review at 9. And then at 10:17 a.m., I got the calendar invite. Subject: lunch with Mr. Dalton. Mr. Dalton was the new CEO. Young, polished, MBA from Penn. He'd been brought in by the board to modernize operations, which was corporate speak for replace everyone who's been here too long. I didn't think much of it at first. Maybe he wanted to talk about the new integration suite I was designing. Maybe he wanted insight on the cloud transition. Maybe the lunch was at Solera, an upscale Mediterranean spot downtown. I knew what that meant. They only took clients there, not staff. I sat across from Mr. Dalton. Carson Hale, the VP of Strategy, was already sipping sparkling water when I arrived. Dalton smiled politely. Eric, we really appreciate what you've done here. I nodded, waited. But we're making a shift, he continued, slicing a salmon like he'd done 100 times. A generational shift. I stared at him, expressionless. We're bringing in a new director for systems. Someone who better aligns with where we're headed digitally. I raised an eyebrow. Someone younger. Carson smirked. Someone with vision. I could have said 100 things. I could have reminded them that the only reason our systems hadn't collapsed during the ransomware scare in 2021 was because of me. That the internal dashboard everyone relied on, my idea, my architecture, my hands. But I just nodded and said calmly, understood. And then I finished my risotto, bite by bite. I signed the severance papers before dessert. A 6-week transition. No bad press. No leaks. Back at the office. My access had already changed. Admin privileges. Gone. Code repositories. Archived. My name had vanished from the org chart like I had never existed. No formal announcement. No goodbye message. Just quiet deletion. I walked past the dev pit. Some of the younger engineers gave me awkward half nods, like they weren't sure if they should say something or not. Kara, the intern I'd trained for the past 3 months, looked like she was about to cry. I just gave her a gentle smile and kept walking. They thought I was defeated, that I'd fade away quietly. But what they didn't know, what Carson Hale didn't know, was that 3 weeks ago, I'd already seen this coming. I had noticed the red flags, the meetings I was excluded from, the access logs that showed someone else poking around in my private code base, the shift in tone during strategy sessions when my name wasn't mentioned. So I did what I do best. I documented, I tracked, and I quietly began preparing for my own transition. That night, I sat alone in my apartment, lights off, the soft hum of the city seeping through the window. 13 years, reduced to a lunch bill. And yet, I didn't feel broken. Not yet. Something inside me had gone. Still, not empty. Just waiting. I didn't show up to work the next day. Instead, I went to a diner down by the river, the kind of place nobody from Crossbridge would ever think to find me. I ordered black coffee, eggs over easy, and pulled my laptop from my bag. Outside, barges rumbled down the Ohio River, heavy with steel and grain, their engines humming low and steady, like a heartbeat. I stared at the screen for a long moment before opening the file. I called it Blueprints. Not company property, not under Crossbridge servers. Just my notes, my designs, my dreams, all the frameworks I had developed in my own time, all the improvements I had sketched out after midnight coding marathons, all the pieces of my career they thought they were stealing when they erased me. Wrong. Blueprints was mine, and more than that, it was better than anything they had now. When I finished reviewing it, a thought crept into my mind, slow and sure. They need me more than I need them. That afternoon, I drove past the Crossbridge headquarters. The glass facade gleamed in the sun, bright and hollow. Inside, they were probably congratulating Nathan, the new director. Nathan Martin, 29 years old, 2 years at a tech consulting firm, hired for buzzwords, not backbone. I'd seen him once in a cafeteria, explaining blockchain to someone over a salad. I remembered thinking, this kid wouldn't last a month in a real outage. Now he was running the very systems I had spent over a decade weaving together like fine silk. I should have felt rage. Should have wanted to storm in, rip it all apart. But I didn't. I felt calm, because I knew something they didn't. Crossbridge wasn't built on glossy slideshows or networking lunches. It was built on uptime, on reliability, on the quiet, brutal work that nobody ever notices until it's gone. And Nathan didn't even know where the hidden vulnerabilities were. Didn't know about the legacy bridge and production servers, the undocumented dependencies that only I understood. I smiled to myself. They had no idea how fragile their little empire had become. That night, I sent a text to Mike Campbell, an old friend, CTO at a logistics company upstate. Hey, Mike, might be open to some consulting. Got a few ideas. His reply came back 3 minutes later. We need to talk. Urgent. The next morning, I packed my personal server drives into the trunk of my car. Not Crossbridge's data, not even close, just the private frameworks, templates, and tools I had built on my own time. Tools that could reshape warehouse management from the ground up. Stuff that, if Crossbridge had bothered to ask, I would have license to them. But now it would fuel something better. I wasn't going to sue. I wasn't going to send angry emails. I wasn't even going to warn them. I was just going to move on and let the systems I had built, the ones they no longer understood, speak for themselves. The first cracks appeared sooner than I thought. 3 days after my departure, Vanessa, the only one who had texted a genuine goodbye, messaged me. Hey, weird question. How do you restart the fulfillment load balancer manually? I stared at the screen for a long time. I could have answered, could have been the bigger person. Instead, I typed, sorry, Vanessa, I'm not authorized to assist anymore. Wishing you all the best. Because here's the truth no one tells you about loyalty. When you give it away to people who don't value it, you don't owe them anything after. You owe it to yourself to move forward. Two weeks after walking away from Crossbridge, I signed my first consulting contract. Mike's company needed an overhaul. Badly. Outdated systems, supply chain bottlenecks, inventory losses piling up by the day. They were stuck in the same swamp Crossbridge had been in before. I rebuilt everything from scratch. Difference was, this time I owned the swamp. I spent 14 hours a day rebuilding their systems, deploying my private frameworks, creating resilient networks that could survive power failures, cyber attacks, natural disasters. I was in my element. No endless meetings. No middle managers questioning every choice. Just work, real work, and results. Mike gave me full control. No questions asked. By the end of the second month, the warehouse throughput increased by 22%. Order accuracy jumped to 98%. The logistics center went from barely surviving to outperforming competitors twice their size. Word traveled fast. A regional distribution company called, then a manufacturing hub in Indiana, then a cold storage network near Chicago. They didn't want consultants. They wanted me. By April, I was turning down contracts. I rented a small office above an old bookstore in downtown Dayton. Bare brick walls, creaky wooden floors, a view of the river. I bought a second-hand oak desk, set up 2 monitors, and hung a small frame print above the window. Build quietly. Move steadily. Leave no apologies. The best part? Nobody called me a resource anymore. I was respected. Meanwhile, news from Crossbridge trickled in like small ripples breaking against a dam. Vanessa called me one evening, voice low, words careful. "We had a major outage last week," she said. "Production floor went down for almost 3 hours." "What happened?" I asked, even though I already knew. Server misconfiguration. "Nathan tried to modernize the legacy system you designed. Didn't realize the warehouse robotics interface was custom coded." I smiled, small and silent. "Was it bad?" I asked. She hesitated. $200,000 in losses. Maybe more. I let that sink in. Vanessa didn't say it out loud, but I heard it in her voice. They needed me. They just didn't realize it until too late. We talked a little longer. About her kids, about old office jokes, about nothing and everything. Before we hung up, she said quietly, "You built something real here, Aaron." Nobody else ever understood that. I sat in the dark after the call ended, listening to the hum of the city outside my window. I thought about what Crossbridge had thrown away, because they couldn't measure on a balance sheet. And I thought about what I was building now, something that couldn't be stolen, because it wasn't about a job title. It wasn't about a corner office. It wasn't even about revenge anymore. It was about value. Real, undeniable, earned value. And there are some things no one could ever take away. Three months after leaving Crossbridge, my phone rang during a late lunch. It was Mike. His voice was tight, urgent. "Aaron," he said, "got a weird call this morning. Crossbridge is asking about System Core." I froze for half a second, then leaned back in my chair. System Core was the integrated logistics platform I had spent 6 years building, buried inside Crossbridge's backbone, undocumented, unlabeled, and absolutely critical. I had written every line of code on my own time, every update, every patch, every optimization. They never paid for it. They never owned it. And when I signed that final exit document, no one even mentioned intellectual property, because they never thought I mattered enough to check. "They're offering to license it," Mike continued, sounding amused. "Apparently their internal rebuild isn't going well. Production delays, client complaints, big ones." I smiled. Small, quiet, predictable. "What did you tell them?" I asked. "I said I'd have to check with our provider," he replied, chuckling. "Thought you might enjoy that." That night, I pulled up my private server. System Core was running on 3 different client platforms now, each licensed properly, each generating steady revenue streams. Crossbridge didn't have a legal leg to stand on. Their copy of System Core, it was running on a legacy license. No renewal terms. No maintenance guarantee. When I left, I hadn't sabotaged anything. I just took my hands off the wheel, and a machine without a mechanic eventually breaks itself. The next morning, my lawyer sent a polite, surgically worded letter to Crossbridge, confirming my sole ownership of System Core, offering a corporate license agreement, quoting a 7-figure annual fee, non-negotiable. Preston's assistant replied within 2 hours, requesting a meeting. I declined. The terms were already clear. Crossbridge had 2 choices: pay for what they no longer understood, or watch their infrastructure collapse. I wasn't malicious. I didn't gloat. I just watched as the consequences of their choices bloomed like storm clouds over their shiny new office tower. 2 weeks later, I received a wire transfer. 7 figures. Cleared. Confirmed. No apology attached. But none needed. The money wasn't the victory. It was the proof. Proof that the quiet guy in the back room, the one they dismissed with a handshake and a scripted speech, had built something so vital, so irreplaceable, that even after they pushed him out, they had no choice but to come back and pay at full price. Luis called me that evening. "They finally signed, huh?" he asked. I laughed, a dry sound. "They didn't sign," I said. "They surrendered." 6 months after walking out of Crossbridge, I stood on the deck of a small house I'd bought near the Blue Ridge Mountains. Not a mansion, not a symbol, just a home. A place built solid and simple, like the work I'd spent my life doing. The evening air smelled like pine and wet earth. In the distance, the last light of the sunset dripped gold over the rolling hills. I leaned on the railing, coffee in hand, and watched the world slow down. No alarms, no corporate memos, no scheduled performance reviews. Just breathing, just being. System Core was thriving, for new clients on board, more inquiries every week. But I wasn't chasing contracts anymore. I chose who I worked with, and just as important, who I didn't. Luis and Vanessa had both joined me by then, each working part-time, building things that mattered instead of putting out fires for executives who never saw them. We didn't talk about Crossbridge much. It wasn't necessary. Some bridges don't burn with flames. They collapse quietly under the weight of their own arrogance. I heard from Darren a few weeks later. Crossbridge's transition hadn't gone smoothly. Client losses, internal audits, an exodus of senior engineers who realized too late what had been lost. Preston had taken a consulting role somewhere in Dallas. Out of sight, out of power, out of mind. Funny how small the world gets when you stop trying to prove your worth to people who never deserved it. I sipped my coffee, feeling the night slide over the mountains like a soft, dark quilt. In the quiet, a simple truth settled in my chest. Success isn't about the applause you get when you're standing at the top. It's about the silence you earn when you walk away, knowing you built something real, something that didn't need permission to exist. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need validation. I didn't need them. I had something better. I had the kind of peace you can't fake, and you can't steal, the kind you build with your own 2 hands, one quiet, relentless day at a time. The stars began to blink alive above the hills. Somewhere, far below, the world kept spinning. I stayed a little longer on that deck, listening to the trees sigh in the breeze, the soft creak of the wood under my feet, the heartbeat of a life rebuilt on my own terms. Tomorrow would come. So would the next project, the next idea, the next sunrise. But tonight belonged to a man who had been underestimated, dismissed, replaced. The man who didn't fight to stay, the man who chose to rise and never look back.